Hello again. The Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, hopes to get South Africa a membership of the United Nations Human Rights Council. The Council is currently meeting in Geneva in Switzerland. Pandor has launched the country's candidature of the Human Rights Council for the period 2023 to 2025. The intergovernmental body aims to promote and protect all human rights. The Council is made up of 47 states, and only 13 of those are African countries. Well, to talk more about the importance of this Council and being a member, I'm joined now by international relations expert at Africa 55 States, Dr. Charles Sinkala. Dr. Sinkala, good afternoon. First up, just let's enlighten ourselves, and including our viewers, what is the Human Rights Council? What is it all about?
Dan, thank you very much, and good afternoon to your viewers. I think one will understand that human rights are the basic needs of a human being to survive. And having an organization such as United Nations to have a Human Rights Council, it speaks to the influence and the decision-making to determine what human rights should be addressed and how they should be made effective to member states in the world.
So for Naledi Pandor to be going there today to say South Africa should be a member is a good thing?
Yes, it is a good thing, you know. However, my only worry is that why should the Human Rights Council of the United Nations should limit the participation for member states, such as South Africa, which pays a lot of money to the United Nations to support its work, you know. It should be a membership that is permanent, that should not be confined to a period of 2023 to 2025. Automatically in each and every country in the world, and those who are members of the United Nations Human Rights Council, they should be part and parcel of the United Nations Security Council. It is not about application, but about respecting the parameters of the human rights. But that is on one angle. But one will also look at the reports, the past reports on the practices and what is the benefit of having a council seat at the United Nations Council for Human Rights. And if you look at what is happening in the world, what is happening in the Ukraine and Russia's conflict in terms of in line with the participation of what the United Nations are doing, you know, in terms of preventing and mitigating the risk of escalation of the losses of the human rights, and as well as the rest of the African continent, not mentioning other parts of the world where human rights violations are left alone to those perpetrators who are doing so. We have seen how the transition of power has been in the western part of Africa. If we have to talk about Africa, the coup d'etats and the deaths of innocent young men and women and children and men and elderly people at the hands of those who are signatories to the United Nations, and the United Nations effort and capacity to mitigate that has been questionable.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering about when it comes to human rights. I mean, this is the month of March in South Africa, 21st of March. In 20 days' time, this country will be commemorating Human Rights Day in memory of the 69 people who were mowed down by the apartheid police in Sharpeville in 1961. So I'm thinking here, what would be the current? You've mentioned a couple of things, like you've referred to a coup d'etats, for example, in parts of the continent. But what would be the key human rights issues that, as an African country, if South Africa became a member of this Human Rights Council, should be putting on the table?
Yes, I think, you know, on the perspective of South African bilateral and multilateral relationship with the world, you know, human rights and the position of South Africa has to be respected. We have seen that violations of human rights has continued to be entertained either within the South African government space and through the body of the United Nations with little or no interventions. We have seen the escalation of the mushrooming of refugees, those refugees who stayed at one time. I visited them in Cape Town at the church, and at a market, waiting to be either sent to other countries without little intervention from the United Nations Human Rights Council, who are situated there in Pretoria. We have seen no collaboration from them in terms of intervening, either to hold their presidents of those refugees who are in South Africa to account that, we've got your people who are here and they're stranded. I never heard of them intervening in terms of that. But looking at the bigger picture, in terms of Africa and South Africa in particular, where we have seen the minister, Naledi Pandor, to campaign for the participation in the period of 2023 and 2025, it's a very good idea, in the pretext that in a normal world, the United Nations Human Rights Council shall support in partnership with South Africa, either multilateral or bilateral engagements in terms of maintaining or preventing any human rights violation in the circumference of South Africa and beyond. But, with the lack of that good track record from the United Nations Security Council, the efforts of campaigning to be part of that council, they are fruitless. But, looking at globalization and the participation of countries at the United Nations level, that just gives confidence to discuss and meet those human rights people or countries at that platform. That will give a good precedence in terms of engaging. But, we can only hope for the best, that the call is good for South Africa, especially in terms of migration, which has become a big issue in South Africa, with little help from either the sending countries of those refugees or those who are in diaspora, who cannot be assisted by the government due to capacity in terms of budgetary terms.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles Sankala of Africa 55 States, giving us some of his views about South Africa's attempts via Naledi Pandor, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, to get South Africa to be a full member of the United Nations Human Rights Council for the period 2023 to 2025.